Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second Philosophical Fireside Chat, wherein I read a famous parable from philosophical literary history and discuss its context and wider meaning. Tonight I have a selection from the Symposium, and it's one that always emphasizes the need to actually read the texts that are quoted or discussed throughout philosophical history, because it's so crazy that it's rarely discussed, actually. And if you want to know if someone's actually read the Symposium, it's one of those sections that just doesn't come up. And so people often don't even know it's in there because they're reading, excerpts or discussions or critiques or something. And this is almost always left out, even though I think it's both wonderful and crazy and very important for the argument that Socrates and Plato are making. So Plato is in discussion here with Agathon and the rest of the company at the Symposium, and we're trying to discover the nature and meaning and, function of love is the subject of discussion. And so Socrates here is in dialogue with Diotima, who was the woman who taught him everything. He always claims that he learned everything from somebody else, that it was never original with him, that it's either inspired by the gods or it came from Diotima. So here he goes. He says, "What then is love?" I asked of Diotima. "Is he mortal?" "No," she said. "What then?" I said. "As in the former instance, he is neither mortal nor immortal, but it's a mean between the two," she said. "What is he, Diotima?" "He is a spirit, a daemon, and like all spirits, he is intermediate between the divine and the mortal." "And what," I said, "is his power?" Diotima said, "He interprets," she replied, "between gods and men, conveying and taking across to the gods the prayers and sacrifices of men, and to men the commands and replies of the gods. He is the mediator who spans the chasm which divides them, and therefore in him all is bound together, and through him the arts of the prophet and the priest, their sacrifices and the mysteries and charms, and all the prophecy and incantation find their way. For God mingles not with man, but through love all the intercourse and converse of God with man, whether awake or sleep, is carried on. The wisdom which understands this is spiritual. All other wisdom, such as that of the arts and handicrafts, is mean and vulgar. Now these spirits or intermediate powers are many and diverse, and one of them is love." I asked, "And who was his father and who his mother?" "The tale," she said, "will take time. Nevertheless, I will tell you. On the birthday of Aphrodite there was a feast of the gods, at which the god Porus, or Plenty, who was the son of Cunning, was one of the guests. When the feast was over, Penia, or Poverty, as is the manner on such occasions, came about the doors to beg. Now Plenty, who was the worse for drinking nectar, there was no wine in those days, went into the garden of Zeus and fell into a heavy sleep. And Poverty, considering her own strained circumstances, plotted to have a child by him, and accordingly she lay down by his side, and they made love and conceived Love, who partly because he is naturally a lover of the beautiful, and because Aphrodite herself is beautiful, and also because he was born on her birthday, is her follower and attendant. And as his parentage is, so also are his fortunes. In the first place, he is always poor, and anything but tender and fair, as many imagine him. And he is rough and squalid, and has no shoes, nor a house to dwell in. On the bare earth exposed, he lies under the open heaven. In the streets or at the doors of houses, taking rest. And like his mother, he is always in distress. Like his father, too, whom also partly resembles. He is always plotting to acquire the fair and good. He is bold, enterprising, strong, a mighty hunter, always weaving some intrigue or other, keen in the pursuit of wisdom, fertile in resources, a philosopher at all times, terrible as an enchanter, sorcerer, or sophist. He is by nature neither mortal nor immortal, but alive and flourishing at one moment when he is in plenty, and dead at another moment, and again alive by reason of his Father's nature. But that which is always flowing in always flows out, and so he is never in want and never in wealth. And further, he is a mean between ignorance and knowledge. The knowledge of the matter is this: no God is a philosopher or seeker after wisdom, for he is wise already. Nor does any man who is wise seek after wisdom. Neither do the ignorant seek after wisdom. For herein is the evil of ignorance, that he who is neither good nor wise is nevertheless satisfied with himself. He has no desire for that which he feels no want. But who then, Diotima, I said, are the lovers of wisdom, if they are neither the wise nor the foolish? A child may answer that question, she replied. They are those who are in the mean between the two. Love is one of them, for wisdom is a most beautiful thing, and love is of the beautiful, and therefore love is also a philosopher, or lover of wisdom. And being a lover of wisdom is a mean between the wise and the ignorant. And of this too is his birth the cause, for his father is wealthy and wise, and his mother poor and foolish. Such, my dear Socrates, is the nature of the spirit of love. The error in the conception of him was very natural, and as I imagine from what you say, has arisen out of a confusion of love and the beloved, which made you think that love was all beautiful. For the beloved is truly beautiful and delicate and perfect and blessed, but the principle of love is another nature, and is such as I have described. And that was based on the translation by Jowett, which I made a few corrections for the sake of clarity. So, wow, what a strange story. What is the nature of love? So there's a party at the gods for Aphrodite's birthday, and the god of plenty gets drunk and falls asleep out in the garden. And so along comes poverty, and she sees a drunk and passed out plenty asleep in the garden, and she gets this idea of, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll go over, and while he's asleep, I'll seduce him, and we can have sex, and we'll conceive a child, and that'll be great. And that is the child love. So whatever you think of as the origin and nature of love, I bet if you haven't read the Symposium, it's not that. That would be my guess. I'm just going to take a stab. That's probably not the idea that you had of love. And so what is going on here? One of the things that's difficult to see in translation is the fact that the Greek here, in the original Greek, they're working on a couple of concepts that overlap, and we don't have any real clear capacity. There's no good language that we have that overlaps with what the language is being used in the Greek, because they're shifting around, or Plato is shifting around very purposefully. And so there's basically philo as a type of love, hence philosopher, a lover of knowledge. And so one of the things that's being played with is, why would someone be a lover of knowledge, philosopher, if they had knowledge? So you only love for or long for or have desire for those things you lack. And this is the kind of language that's being played on, because you have philo love. You also have this concept of love, epithmia. I'm certainly pronouncing that wrong, so apologize there, but epithmia, which is sort of longing and desire, but usually more base, more like I'm really hungry, right? So that would be an epithmia, more of the body. And then eros, which is both more erotic, but it also has a more romantic sort of air to it. So spiritual wouldn't be the same idea, but eros is a child of Aphrodite. So you have that element as well. So one of the things that's also happening that you don't really see in the language is the shifting between philo, love, epithmia, which is desire of the body and sort of drives, and then eros, romantic love. It's a little clearer what they're playing at here. So that's one issue. You also have the issue of kalon, which is that kalon can mean the beautiful, the true, or the good. So when she says love desires beautiful, this is also can be read as the love desires truth. And so again, the notion that the love of sophistry, the love of truth, also gets wrapped up into this notion of the desire for beauty and the desire for the good. So there's these concepts that overlap in a different way. And so they're playing with, or Socrates is playing, and Plato is playing with this language. But so what is going on here with these drives and desires? So first, notice there's this question of, can you love and have a desire for and a drive for something that you have? And so the common example that's used is, you really want food when you're hungry, but if you're not hungry and you're sated, you're like, well, I don't really have that drive. This would be, again, the epithemia. And so they said the gods can't have these drives. Now, there's no evidence, by the way. If you read the Greek myths, you wouldn't think this. I never thought this. Perhaps you would. But it never occurred to me that this is true. So why people go along with Socrates on this argument, I don't know. But they do. So yes, we're going to go along with them. And this idea, though, is that, well, the gods, because they have wisdom, see, you don't long for things. You don't have the desire and drive for things that you have. You have the desire and drive for things that you lack. And so love then is seen as a mediator, a mixed force. And one thing that I like about this myth and this argument that's made here, to the degree that it's an argument, it's a little story, is we tend to have this drive towards good and evil, right and wrong, right? This very binary. We don't like mixed things. And what Socrates is arguing here via diatoma is, no, we're mixed creatures, right? That we can both be ignorant of things, but we can also know things, and we can also strive to overcome our ignorance. Right? This is a drive. This is a desire that we can have. And if you're a philosopher, this is what's happening. You have the love of knowledge means that you have the desire for those things that you lack. And so love being this mixed property of both being born of plenty and of want, it gives you that drive. And so love perceives the beautiful, which is also the true and the good, and drives you in that direction, or can drive you in the direction. And so that it plays this part of pointing, of being an action that drives towards the good. And so in the end, when Diatoma says you've confused that the thing that you love is perfect, not love, is an argument that's come up earlier. Love is perfect, love is beautiful, love is kind, love is all those wonderful things that people always say. And here Socrates says, no. Love is poor, it lives on the bare earth, it's mean, it begs about the doors of other people's houses, it has no shoes, right? Quite love that language, that love has no shoes. And it comes and goes, it waxes and wanes. It's full at time and empty at times. And this argument is to say, one, humans are variable, but that the drive itself, if pointed towards the true object of love, which is again the beautiful and the good, is it's driving us to immortality. It's driving us towards the gods. It's driving us towards the absolute perfect. And so it's a great force that impels us in a direction, but is itself not of that nature. So it's a really interesting, I think, and different take on how we would normally think about love. But further, this notion that it's a mean between things. Now, in Aristotelian philosophy, and in philosophy at the time of the Greeks, even before Aristotle, the importance of finding moderation was a hugely important conception ethically. And so we tend to view the mixed as problematic. Again, for the Greeks, often the mean is the best, right? You don't want the perfect. You want the balanced and the harmonious, not the pure. See, notice the distinction that's being made there. in theory, the gods have the pure, the absolute knowledge. There is purity out there that can be attained. So it's not that they're opposed to that. But in action, in ethical interrelationships with people on earth, with our own comportment and our own understanding of who we are, one wants balance and harmony rather than purity. And so this is a huge distinction if you read the Greek classics compared to the Christian impulse, which is to say, there's pure love and tainted love. And they're like, no, love is always mixed, right? This is the nature of love. It is a mixed thing. The notion that you're going to have a pure or less pure version of it is simply a misunderstanding. Or that if you completely get your heart right, then, you'll be the perfect vessel for God's love. And they're like, yeah, the gods don't do love because they have no need of it, right? So it's, right, because why would they? Because they don't lack anything. And so if love is this thing that drives you towards that which you lack and is an intermediary between the gods, then the gods don't, it's not them, it's this other force, this non-immortal force that Socrates is arguing for. Another element of this within context is Socrates is arguing against the gods, essentially. And this is how if you want to know how to get put to death for blasphemy, which of course happened to Socrates, this is how you do it right here, is because he doesn't want to say that the gods are imperfect, flawed, and terrible. And so what he does is he tries to extract these elements and say, well, look, love is really not an aspect of the gods as we understand them. Because, of course, we all know the gods are perfect. He's always going to say that. We all know the gods are perfect. However, how do you explain away, how do you deal with all of this massive imperfection that surrounds us all the time, particularly when things are related to love and desire and eros and epithemia? Well, one way is you just say, these elements have nothing to do with the gods. But you end up making this strange argument for something that doesn't sound very Greek at the end of the day, like that plenty and want had sex in the garden there of Zeus and conceived a son who's going to go about driving people to all these acts, is an interesting parable, but it also, notice it sort of displaces a bit of Aphrodite and a bit of Eros, right? Usually we ascribe Aphrodite to the driver of this. And so what Socrates is trying to point out is the, again, mixed and challenging and curious nature of love without assigning that to the gods. And he does this by creating a new myth that sounds awfully suspiciously, again, a touch blasphemous, which people do note. They're like, Socrates. And so this is important to note as well, that this is not like a commonly held Greek concept of love at all, which is why the Symposium is so important, is because you do get this series of arguments about love in which concepts we would be more comfortable with and more familiar with do get discussed and argued. And of course, Socrates comes in at the end with his stories like this of Diotima and this, sort of mixed nature of love born of poverty and want, and is trying to shift that concept. But he's shifting it away from the notion of Aphrodite and Eros and the gods are perfect, and, their interactions with men are troubling because of men being flawed, and he's sort of slowly rewriting this. So there's just a brief excerpt from one of the greatest philosophical classics. And if you've ever sat down and read the Symposium, what you get from it is this series of unbelievable arguments, literally unbelievable, I would say, that raise all kinds of interesting questions. And so one way to approach this, and again, to approach each one of these sections, and I've mentioned this before, is people often ask me, like, well, how long does it take to read some philosophical work? And I'm like, well, I think forever, essentially, because you want to stop and go, okay, I just read this section. It's not that it's true. The question, I would say, is more apt to ask is, what does it expose? what is Socrates on about? What is the argument he's trying to make? And part of this is like, yeah, if you are a philosopher here, philo, lover of wisdom again, lover of knowledge, why are you driven? Why do you lack it? Why do some people want certain things and other people don't? Why are some people driven to seek knowledge while other people just seem, as they say, perfectly content to be ignorant and in fact don't even know that they lack something? And if you teach them that they lack something, as Socrates is always trying to do, is that helpful or cruel? And so one of the things that Socrates is doing there is justifying his entire process, his Socratic process of trying to explain to people that they don't know what they think they know. He's trying to introduce ignorance to them so that if they're aware of their ignorance, then love will come in. Their love of knowledge, their desire to know has a place to be. And so now that desire to know has a place to be, it can drive them towards the beloved, the knowledge, the good, the true, the just. And that is essentially, for Socrates and in the greater dialogue of the Symposium, this is basically drives you towards immortality. This is the revealing science. This is the one that really takes you where you want to go, is when you have the desire to overcome your ignorance. Now you have a place for love, for this intermediary, to drive you towards the God, to drive you towards enlightenment and to spiritual uplift. And so what is often taken as a base sort of sexual motive, and notice this starts as a sexual story of, of poverty sleeping with want, or poverty sleeping with plenty there in Zeus's garden because plenty is drunk, ends up being the story of mixed love being the vehicle that can in fact carry us to the greatest wisdom. And it is the drive that is mixed but is necessary and hugely important. So, thank you for listening to this little fireside chat, and I hope it makes you have pause about your concepts of love and gives you a little something to think about.